Hello, this is our video on communicating and visualizing data through images. To introduce this concept, I will quote David McCandless, the journalist. He says, "By visualizing information, we turn it into a landscape that we can explore with our eyes, a sort of information map. And when you are lost in information, an information map is kind of useful."
Now, what kind of images are we talking about here?
Well, we decided to focus on data visualizations regarding the Occupy movement, since Occupy is a very new and highly visual phenomenon. We did a little digging on the internet, starting on the Occupy Research website, and found some efforts at communicating and visualizing data on the Occupy movement through graphs and charts and word maps.
So, let's get started. I see this first image is a familiar map of the world, but what do the red X's actually mean?
The red X's represent different Occupy sites around the world.
I see. So there are large concentrations of Occupy sites in North America and Europe, but very few recorded Occupy sites on other continents. I wonder why that is.
Yes, this map leaves a lot of room for more research. Now I want to show you one last thing. If we refresh the page, and continues, we see the X's populate by date of each Occupy site's inception. We see the first two X's pop up in Malaysia and New York, and then rapidly spread throughout the United States and the rest of the world.
It's interesting to me that the map has both a spatial and a temporal component. Okay, let's go on to the next image.
Right. So while the last image was essentially static, this image from Trendistic.com enables us to visualize how Occupy is trending on Twitter throughout time.
I see. So what's this spike here?
This spike was on March 17th, which was the 6-month anniversary of Occupy Wall Street. Here we see that this blue line represents the hashtag OWS, while the yellow line represents Occupy in general.
But I don't see the red line.
The red line represents the hashtag Occupy Wall Street, which has clearly fallen out of use. If we look back to 90 days, then we see a little bit more of the red line. And I bet if we go back to 180 days in 2011, we get a very different picture of the data.
Yes, there's a massive spike on November 15th, but soon after, then there's a massive decline in Twitter activity regarding the Occupy movement. Kind of puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, this visualization of data really shows how the Occupy movement is constantly changing. So let's go on to the next image.
Wow, there's a lot going on here. So what are the grey spikes?
Well, this image from Numerateca.org compares Occupy coverage in major newspapers with the number of Occupy tweets per day from September 17th to December 13th. This huge gray spike that you see is Twitter activity, next to a large red spike in newspaper coverage. So if we zoom in, and then we go down to the bottom here, we see the November 15th was the eviction of Occupy Wall Street, and that corresponds to those spikes.
Okay, it's interesting actually to see how it's more informative to have the two forms of media side by side. This makes for a clearer picture than the last image, which focused solely on Twitter trends. Okay, so are there any other types of visualization?
Yes. So these hashtag Occupy Wall Street analyses, also from socialflow.com, are particularly interesting and visually engaging. These images, called network visualizations, compare the Twitter activity regarding the Occupy movement in July 2011, when Occupy Wall Street was in the planning stages, to October 2011, when Occupy Wall Street was threatened with eviction.
To me, these look a bit like fiber optics, but what do these big circles mean?
So it says here that we are so used to seeing these rapid transitions on Twitter, yet what we see in this case is an extremely slow buildup of information spread. Below is a network graph representing all tweets that included the Occupy Wall Street hashtag in the first 10 days since the hashtag was published by Adbusters. The size and color of the nodes represent their importance in spreading the word. The lighter and larger a node is, the more influential it is in terms of spreading the information.
I see. So what's this cluster to the right mean?
That's a really good question, and there's more of a close-up here. The network branch represents much of the Spanish contingent that reposted and spread the hashtag at a very early stage. This Spanish contingent helped post and spread the word about Occupy Wall Street before much of the United States had even heard about it.
That's saying something. So this image represents the Twitter activity on October 13th.
Yes, in a matter of a few hours. As you can see, there was an explosion of activity, not only from Occupy Wall Street, but from media outlets such as the Huffington Post.
So I think I understand network visualizations now, but are there any other ways to communicate and visualize data through images?
Yes. The OWS research website has a number of word clouds and other visualizations that represent survey data collected in January and February of this year.
I like how these are called word clouds. So here we see most commonly cited words from members of the movement about different topics, which is indicated by the relative size of the word. In this first one, American is clearly how most people within Occupy Wall Street describe their identity, but people also identify with being human and a host of other communities.
Right. So if we go down here, we also see a different type of visualization, illustrating how occupiers comment on police actions in their city and the rate of their Occupy encampment. This is a visualization of answers that started with the word police, and although the image is small, we can get an idea of the tremendous variety of responses.
So here are two more examples. This one is a word cloud showing the geographic spread of Occupy Wall Street, and while not surprisingly NYC immediately stands out, so does the word San for many cities with that prefix, along with many US states and different countries.
So this word cloud expands on the first map that we looked at, providing us with more information about where occupiers are concentrated. The last thing we want to look at is a list of responses from Occupy Wall Street regarding the future of the movement. Though the response that immediately jumps out at me is mass demonstrations, but I'm also overwhelmed by the huge number of ideas.
But in some ways, I find this clearer because I don't have to keep turning my head. And I think this is a good example of how communicating data through images is underpinned by vision science that informs graphic design.
I agree. Let's finish with a third map example here. So from OccupyNews.com. So this is a map of North America that shows the top needs for Occupy sites through content analysis of Occupy tweets.
It's a bit blurry, but I see that for the hashtag Occupy Portland, it says that the top need is batteries. Who knew?
Yes, this is a very effective way of communicating data through an image rather than a statistical table. If someone wanted to support their local Occupy site by donating something, they could look at this map and make an informed decision.
Since we are bombarded with information about the Occupy movement every day through different forms of media, communicating data through images is a very effective way of synthesizing information about the Occupy movement into, like David McCandless says, a landscape that we can explore with our eyes, a sort of information map. Our culture is becoming increasingly visual, and devices like maps, network graphs, and word clouds may become the future of communicating data.